No matter how week 4 made you feel about losing to a bitter division rival, week 5 is here. Ron Rivera has given us plenty of bulletin board material, and King Henry and the Tennessee Titans, who were top the NFC, or excuse me, the AFC in 2021 with their 12-5 record, are coming to town for the breast cancer awareness game. And the question remains, can the Commanders keep the former rushing leader in check now that they are getting hot? This Sunday is the attack on the Titans as they open as 3.5-point favorites at FedEx Field. But welcome to the preview edition of the Sidelines Washington podcast, where we take command for the Sidelines Sports Network. I'm your host and head of operations here, Parker Hamlett. If you're listening to us in the audio realm, guys, as always on this beautiful Thursday, make sure you subscribe, leave a rating and a review, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. It really doesn't matter, guys. Pick your poison. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you guys subscribe and do what it says in the intro. Click that bell to turn on all notifications. We're coming to you guys twice a week for the preview and post-game, Tuesdays and Thursdays, exclusive YouTube content as needed, as warranted, really. Not a lot to talk about lately. There's been a pretty down in the dumps kind of last couple of weeks, hoping that this football team, Commanders, can get it right. But joining me for this preview edition for week 5 is a very special guest. He is one of the co-hosts of the Commanders Declassified podcast, one of my favorites. We've had Ellie, we've had Eric on the show, but joining me now is my guy, first-time guest, Bryan. Some of you may know him as MisterWhoo on Twitter. Bryan, Titans, kind of doing what we hope that the Commanders are going to do starting this Sunday, getting back to 500. We're hoping that they can string together some wins, maybe against Tennessee, maybe against Chicago on Thursday Night Football. But, a very tumultuous start to the season for the Tennessee Titans. Tough 1-point loss to the Giants, an absolute thrashing to the Bills. And then, of course, they bounced back against the Raiders and then against the divisional opponent Colts this past weekend, which was their 4th straight win versus Indianapolis, the longest winning streak in franchise history. I got to ask, kind of see where you're gauged on this. Do you see this as a bounce back game for the Commanders or a real test? Because, depending on how you feel about this Titans organization, this Titans team, this time last year, they were seen as contenders in the AFC, number 1 seed.
Oh, absolutely. This should be looked at as a bounce back game for the Commanders. The Commanders need this game. They really do. They're reeling right now. Nothing that they're doing is working. And absolutely, the Mike Vrabel has made the Tennessee Titans in a short amount of time one of the more competitive teams in football, and he has them, perennially in the playoffs. So absolutely, this is a measuring stick game. Like if you remember last year, Ron said that Buffalo game was a measuring stick. Well, Buffalo took the measuring stick and beat us with it that game. Hopefully that doesn't happen here with the Titans on Sunday. Hopefully we measure up. Hopefully, this team and this coaching staff kind of take to heart some of the lessons that they've learned here these last couple of weeks, and they're able to pull out the win. But yeah, this is an important game against a good opponent. The Titans were reeling a little bit to start the year, but you can see them at these last 2 games. They're rounding back into form. Derrick Henry is starting to look like King Henry, and that's not a good thing for us. So we've got our work cut out for us on Sunday.
Got our work cut out for us. Very well said. A lot like the other guys at Declassified. You always know your stuff. Make sure you guys check out the Commanders Declassified podcast. Bryan's being noble about it. They're a constant part of my post-game rotation. Those guys are great. So make sure you guys go subscribe. But Mike Vrabel, you kind of went where I was going to go next. This guy's a huge component. I'll never forget that signature win he got last game for Tom Brady in Foxborough. So a big moment for Mike Vrabel, former player. And these former player guys, these Dan Campbell types, these are guys that are flourishing in the league right now. And, you can only hope that a guy like Mike Vrabel could fall into the Commanders' lap if we are talking in a life post-Rivera, who I definitely feel like still has plenty of time with the Burgundy and Gold. But, Vrabel, a Coach of the Year winner, culture being a big word for him. And that was kind of a big reason that they are able to kind of move some of these parts around, trade your A.J. Browns. They think that they can plug some of these young guys in, and they have the culture there. Obviously, they're second in the division right now, 2-2. But coming into this season, Vrabel is 41-24 as a head coach for the Tennessee Titans. So great numbers there. And you talked about their identity, something that the Commanders certainly lack. Their identity, everything runs through King Henry. A lot of stuff's predicated off play action. That makes life a lot easier on Ryan Tannehill. But this Titans offense in 2021, 17th total, 5th in rushing, 24th in passing, 8th on third down. So some encouraging stuff there. Obviously, a lot of this offense runs through Derrick Henry. But, as I said, 24th ranked passing offense. You got to take a look at a guy like Ryan Tannehill, who a lot of people said had a career renaissance when they acquired the 11th year quarterback. A lot of people saying coming into the season as well, his job possibly on the line, a very putrid playoff performance against the Cincinnati Bengals in that huge upset win. Like I said, they were the #1 seed last year, Brian. Yeah. And, in 2021, he finished with an 89.6 passer rating, which is well below the league average. His worst statistical season since 2015 with Miami. And he's some Taylor Heineke touchdown interception ratio here. 21 touchdowns, 14 picks, 3,000 yards, of course. But he's also a multifaceted kind of guy dating back to his college days. This is a very mobile quarterback. And if you watch the week 4 highlights, Brian, you really notice that, he makes a lot of plays and extends a lot of drives with his legs. Some other numbers, he's 14-3 in the AFC South, 5-1 versus the Colts. He is one of the highest graded in the league according to PFF and throws beyond the first read with an 80.3 grade. He's a veteran presence that the Titans certainly needed at the quarterback position when they traded for him. Felt a little bit intimidated by Malik Willis, but Malik Willis has shown us that he still has a long way to go.
Yes,
local guy, definitely rooting for him. He said he wasn't going to mentor him, and that was definitely some controversial stuff there. Yep. Malik already surprisingly, just to show you how bad things were for the Titans earlier in the season, Malik already getting some playing time in week 2 versus the Bills. So things definitely haven't gone their way, but they seem to be getting back on track. And Derrick Henry, 2021, he had 937 rushing yards and 10 TDs in 7 games before breaking his right foot. They draft Hassan Haskins as an insurance policy, hoping Derrick Henry can get back on track. He was, of course, the top 15 rush game this year, and they're just getting started. Derrick Henry in his 7th season, he didn't really become the starter until 2019, but he's second in franchise rushing touchdowns with 65. He only needs 8 more to become an all-time leader. Only 1,000 more yards to become the second all-time rushing yards leader. And, you already mentioned, Brian, kind of the trajectory he's been on. He's on the upswing, kind of back and forth a little bit here throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. He had 21 carries, 82 yards week 1, 12 carries for 25 week 2 in that blowout loss. Week 3, he had 20 carries for 85 yards, and then week 4, which is the big game this last Sunday, 22 carries for 114 yards, 3 touchdowns on the season for him. He also had a touchdown negated by a really bad Robert Woods hold. It was either Robert Woods or Treylon Burks. Can't remember quite off the top of my head, but he's the 3rd highest graded Titan in this win versus the Colts. And they got some pretty stout guys backing him up. Deontay Foreman, who's pretty solid. Yep. I mean, and you look across the rest of this offense, you got Treylon Burks, who I like I said, I think had that hold. Week 2, he had a 79 PFF grade. His snaps just keep going up. There was all this stuff about his conditioning during the summer. Robert Woods, who got his first touchdown of the year this Sunday, he's a great blocker. He's a guy who's not afraid to get dirty. He's averaging 12.8 yards per catch, 75.9 PFF grade. Honorable mention to Josh Gordon, who also saw the field. Which one of these wide receivers, Brian, do you feel like is going to be that Devontae Smith kind of X factor, that CeeDee Lamb kind of X factor for this Titans offense, and who do you think that the Commanders need a game plan for the most?
Well, my first guess was going to be Treylon Burks, but it was reported today that he's got some turf toe, and that he's potentially going to miss this game Sunday. So if that turns out to be the case, I'm going to have to go with the old crafty veteran Robert Woods. He is long in the tooth. He's not explosive, but he does know how to run routes. He does know where to find those soft spots within the zone defense. And as you know, the soft zone defense is a staple here in Washington. That is our favorite defense to run. So that could potentially be some problems right there. So I expect Robert Woods to have a big day because he's going to be the focal point in the pass game. Obviously, their main threat will be Derrick Henry, but any type of throw through the air, I'm looking forward to go to Robert Woods, and then also some screens to King Henry as well. I think that's something that they're going to want to do as well too. But look for Robert Woods, absolutely. Robert
Woods was my X factor kind of guy, wide receiver as well. Yeah. And, obviously Kyle Phillips getting a lot of snaps early in the season as well. There's a couple other guys on that roster, fringe players who kind of made some plays this last week, but I definitely don't see any of them outshining Robert Woods, who is a very savvy veteran wide receiver in this league at this point. He's been passed around a little bit, but like I said, great blocker, knows his role. And with Treylon Burks now with that turf toe that you're just now reporting, and that was my first time actually hearing that, believe it or not. I feel like Robert Woods is a guy that can kind of squeak through. Of course, there are a couple of those fringe guys that you could possibly make an argument for, but like you said, with Burks out, you could definitely see a guy like Robert Woods stepping up, and things not really going according to plan for the Titans to start off the year here. They lose Taylor Lewan. Torn ACL. I think it was the first play of week 2. This is a big year for Taylor Lewan. Who's facing a pay cut, or he's pretty much done with the organization. No guaranteed money. He's owed $14.5 million last year. He's on the final year of his $80 million deal. They drafted Dylan Radins and Nicholas Petit-Frere. And then, of course, they have Nate Davis. A lot of depth issues on the offensive line for Tennessee. You don't see them making excuses, though. I mean, they're getting that ground game going, and they're churning. There's no post-game press conferences where their coach is all somber. They just get things done. And, as far as the offensive start to the season for them in general, Todd Downing had a solid year last year, but really a tough start to 2022. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I mean, this really was a theme up until these last 2 weeks. At one point, they failed to score a single second half point each of their first 2 games. It's 57-7. I think they were outscored by. But, they're trying to get their identity, trying to get back on track. Losing A.J. Brown was always going to be something that was going to heavily affect this offense. And, absolutely. Commanders fans seem to have a very weird opinion on A.J. Brown, but he's a very good wide receiver. And if you don't believe that, look at Mike Vrabel's draft day war room reaction to him being traded. I mean, he did everything but cuss out the owner at that point. Absolutely. But, I will say the Commanders' defense has been pretty stout these last 2 weeks, and for what they've had to deal with, in my opinion, Brian. How do you expect them to attack this Titans offense? Because, I mean, you lose a guy like Taylor Lewan, you're really young on the inside, whereas the Commanders are really old. And, you have Treylon Burks out. I feel like this is a beatable Titans team that does rely a lot on play action. How do you expect the Commanders defense to kind of attack them?
Well, I think you're spot on with what you were saying about the Commanders' defense playing well these last few games, and they've actually switched up some of the coverages that they run in the back end. We've seen a lot more man coverage, which is something I'm sure you and everybody, all of us, have been screaming for these last couple of seasons. But when we do run that man coverage, we force that quarterback to make better throws, tighter throws, and that gives us the ability to knock down passes, be in better position to make the play after the catch, and get off the field on third down. So that has been nice to see that. Some of the blitzing that we've seen from Jamin Davis. Jamin Davis actually has a lot of sacks this year, or in terms of on our team. And he's really starting to come along in the run game. He's got a lot of work to do in the pass game, but we kind of knew that already. And if Jack Del Rio can continue to move Jamin Davis forward, right, have him going forward, attacking that line of scrimmage, especially with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's a bigger back. Those guys, when they get ahead of steam, it's very hard to tackle them. They can easily fall forward for an extra 5 yards. So you've got to attack those guys behind the line of scrimmage and get them down early. And that's where somebody like Jamin Davis, who is super athletic and fast, can shoot those gaps and make that tackle in the backfield for no gain, for a loss, before Derrick Henry can build up that head of steam and then bulldoze right through our defense. So I really think that, if we're able to kind of mix up some of those coverages, play some more man coverage like we have been, which has been a breath of fresh air. It's been awesome to see that. And our defensive line, they've actually played well. Like Jonathan Allen, I mean, he's a stud. He always plays well. Deron Payne has really kind of upped his level this year. Is it a contract year that's making him do it? I don't know, probably, but he's playing really well. So our 2 guys on the inside are doing well. I think we do need some more pass rush help on the outside in terms of our defensive ends, but I think we have a better plan to kind of stop a run game. I think we did decent against the Eagles, and hopefully we can continue that against the Titans.
Huge key component of this game is getting Derrick Henry before he gets that huge, nasty head of steam.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great point. That's honestly a key to victory for the Washington Commanders if they want to bounce back this Sunday against the Titans. And, I'll be very intrigued, Brian, to see how this defense finishes if they do continue on this trajectory that they're on right now. And, I don't know about you, but when, CeeDee Lamb broke open that huge touchdown late in the game, they were only, I think, up 15-10 at that point. Exactly. It was kind of to be expected. You can't expect this defense to stay in these games, be on the field that long, and for them not to allow some huge explosive plays like this. So explosive plays being a huge area of concern for the Commanders the first couple of weeks. They seem to be making up ground in that aspect. And, all that Jack Del Rio talk. Seems like the pendulum is swinging now towards Scott Turner. But, we'll talk about the Titans defense here for a second, led by Shane Bowen, second-year defensive coordinator. They finished 12th overall, second rushing, 25th in passing, 6th scoring, 10th interceptions, and tied for 9th in sacks. So, obviously, these guys are getting to the quarterback a lot. It seems like they are in 2022 to start off the season as well. If there's a guy that I'm worried about, speaking of X factors, it is Jeffrey Simmons, who had a 26.1 pass rush win rate, which doesn't sound great, but a 92.3 pass rush grade, 6 pressures, 1 sack. I mean, this guy is just going to eat up this interior of this offensive line. You got Sadiq Charles now starting right guard. Obviously, they finally ate their crow and admitted that they rushed back Trey Turner, who didn't practice most of the summer. Shouldn't surprise anybody, but Andrew Norwell has just had a horrific start to the season as well. Now you don't have Sam Cosmi, who is lost for the foreseeable future. Hand injury versus Dallas, reported by Ben Stanley. He got surgery today, multiple game kind of stuff. Timetable to be decided with him. Yep. Then Chase Rouillet officially placed on the IR, undergoing season-ending knee surgery, most likely ending his season. He got multiple opinions as far as I'm concerned, or as far as it's being reported. Washington did convert $4.5 million of his base salary into a signing bonus, which creates $3 million cap space. So that's really good to hear. Chase just getting a bunch of rough breaks, but we still got a lot of football left. We're only entering week 5 here. This now means that the Commanders will be without 3 week 1 offensive line starters. They're already on their 3rd center. Wes Schweitzer and Chase both to IR. Now, there is one big factor here, and this is something Rivera's kind of alluded to a little bit. Tyler Larsen being activated. I think this is going to be a big, big addition. Obviously, they relied a lot on Nick Martin. We saw how that ended up. Yep. But, a lot like Brian Robinson Jr., they have 21 days to activate Larsen, but I think that they're going to rush him in as soon as possible. You had Ron Rivera kind of championing that they were top 10 offensive line with Tyler Larsen in, that lineup, that concoction of offensive linemen last year. Rivera seems to be very, very frustrated with these injuries, but, people seem to be upbeat with Sadiq Charles, the right guard. I just, he was part of the Ashburn cycling team for so long.
Yeah.
Him having an increased role, Ryan, really, really scares me. And some other moves that they made, they signed guard Keaton Sutherland and then released John Tooth off the practice squad. I said before Rouillet's injury, almost literally the week before, that there seemed to be no preparation for if things went south. You let Brandon Sheriff walk. That's one thing. Obviously, he didn't want to be here. But you replace him with Trey Turner, who, you roll the film in Pittsburgh. There really wasn't much to be desired there. You get Andrew Norwell, who hasn't really been a good guard in this league for quite some time. You have Chase Rouillet coming back from injury. You're good at tackle, at least so far. And I feel like you were pretty good at tackle last year. Who do you watch out for on this Titans defense? I mean, you had D'Amico Autry have a 90 PFF grade this last week as well against his former team. This is a pass rush with Jeffrey Simmons that I feel like is going to get to these guys early and often and really attack this interior.
Yeah, I think you said it right there. Jeffrey Simmons is going to be the guy. They have another defensive lineman. He's a defensive end, Landry.
Harold Landry, yep.
He's out with injury. Otherwise, I would say him. He's one of the better pass rushers in the league. But Jeffrey Simmons, considering the injuries we do have along that interior, he can be an absolute game wrecker. So, Scott Turner really kind of needs to take that to heart and kind of plan to kind of keep Jeffrey Simmons off of Carson Wentz. Whether we're running the football, whether we're running away from him, whether we're utilizing our quick passing game and going to those 3-step drops, getting the ball out to McKissick, to Curtis Samuel quickly to help that offensive line. Because if you're going to ask them to hold Jeffrey Simmons for a 5-step, 7-step drop every play for 40-plus plays, he's going to have a big day. So we really kind of need to make sure we have a plan for him, maybe some double teams between the center and the guard, whatever we need to do to kind of keep him from collapsing that pocket up the middle, because if that happens, Wentz is going to be in a world of hurt and our team is going to be in a world of hurt. So that's the first guy, first and foremost, I think that we really need to keep our eye on. They've got some solid linebackers. Zach Cunningham is a guy I actually wanted us to draft a few years ago, but he's a tackling machine. He led the league in tackles in 2020. I think he had 163, and then 2019 he led the AFC in tackles with like 137. So he knows where the football is, he knows where it's going, and he particularly makes a play when he's out there. So we've got to worry about him. And then Their free safety, Baird or Byard, I don't know what how you say his name there, Kevin, but he gets a lot of interceptions. The other guys on the outside, they're younger guys, so hopefully we may be able to get some plays on them, but their safety, we do have to worry about him. He's excellent. He's got a ton of interceptions, and he understands NFL offenses and where quarterbacks are trying to take him with the football. So they've got a couple of guys out there, but we certainly have some weapons that we can kind of cause them some problems. And if we utilize them right, I don't see us. I see us having an opportunity to score some points, but we got to be smart about it.
That's a great overview of this Titans defense because maybe they're not making all the high impact plays that they're capable of, but obviously without Harold Landry, a guy that I was literally going to bring up, and beat me to it. 12 sacks and 22 quarterback hits last year.
Good.
And they spent a lot of money at this position at pass rusher, $87 million deal on Landry, and then you give 82 to Bud Dupree, who's finally back. Yep. And, only one sack so far registered on the season, but this is a guy that they expected to come in and be a key pass rusher coming over from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I still think he's got that upside, and you hope he doesn't have that signature performance against the Washington Commanders. Hopefully they can keep him in check. His health's obviously more important to them. Wyatt, Derrick, both guys that I feel like played pretty good in place of those guys last year. They can get to the quarterback. They're completely capable. And, let's move to the other levels of the defense. You already covered it all really well. 2021 first round pick Caleb Farley hasn't quite lived up to the potential. Says he's not happy. Terrence Mitchell getting a little bit more of a role than him. He's also kind of beat out by their rookie corner McCreary. Christian Fulton, kind of a sneaky good guy as well. Someone that I wouldn't be attacking a lot if I was this Washington Commander offensive coordinator. You got Elijah Molden in the slot, somebody I really wanted us to draft not too long ago. I think he's great. Overall, I see a lot of really culpable. That's a word Rivera likes to use. Corners here. I think that you can attack these guys. It really is a shame that we don't have Jahan Dotson, who we talked about in the last episode. Obviously expected to hopefully miss up to a week, possibly two. I say take your time with him, just like you're taking it with Chase. I still feel like you got Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin. Terry looking to bounce back from a very mediocre performance against the Cowboys. And linebacker, you already talked about Zach Cunningham. That's a guy I'm a big fan of as well. But David Long being the stud at linebacker for them so far. 81.5 PFF grade in week 3. Looked very good against Indy. Didn't see his PFF grade for them. But, I mean, really solid group of guys considering they lost Rashad Evans to Atlanta. So, and you already talked about Kevin Byard. I mean, it's an all-pro, Pro Bowl kind of safety. That guy's just a ball hawk, really long, really rangy. And then you got Amani Hooker as well. I mean, you compare those guys up with Buffalo's guys, and you can make an argument they're one of the best safety tandems in the AFC. So you make any mistakes, and these guys are going to make you pay. Yep. And this is a roster that can compete. And, Scott Turner, obviously, you got to cook up some different things. You got to give Carson more time to get the ball out. The game plan is something I'm very interested in going into this matchup, because at each level of this Titans defense, you can argue they've got playmakers. And if you were to kind of attack a certain core of this Titans defense, I said that I think that their corners aren't exactly up to par. I think the top level of the defense with those safeties, I think those guys can go sideline to sideline. We're talking about Jeffrey Simmons in the defensive line. Which level of that defense do you expect Scott Turner to attack the most?
I think if I'm Scott Turner, I'm looking at the middle of the field. While I love Cunningham and I love David Long, I don't think that they're a match for our guys who can who run their routes in the middle of the field. So that's Curtis Samuel, that's J.D. McKissick, that's Logan Thomas. I think if you made a great point with Jahan being out, you can slide Curtis now into that Jahan role, and you can use either Gibson or McKissick in that kind of Curtis Samuel role where he's kind of doing all these routes over in the middle of the field, and take advantage of those linebackers. Get them on some of those quick passes where they have to cover a really kind of quick twitch, fast receiver, running back type of guy, and get some yards right there. Have J.D. McKissick make a move on somebody. J.D. McKissick has moves for days, and he can put one of those linebackers in a blender and turn a 5-yard check down into a 45-yard gain just like that. So utilize those guys there. Logan Thomas is a big physical target. Get him the football. I know he's still kind of coming back from that injury, so he may not run away from anybody, but he's a big guy, big body that can haul in a pass. So I think that's probably where you're going to see him kind of attack, and then hopefully he kind of runs that football, right? Wear this defense down, because they're very good, and if we just let them pass rush us all day, it's we're not going to like the result. So hopefully we can get them on some run plays there and take advantage of that middle of the field, and then maybe we can hit Terry up deep. But with Kevin back there in their secondary, I'd be very careful deep shots that we take.
And with pass rush, they can obviously get home. I think one of the bigger part of the game's plan this week is going to be getting the ball out of Carson Wentz's hands as fast as possible, and that's something Rivera really emphasized in his interview with JB Finley from NBC Sports Washington. But the middle of the field is a great point. That is one of the things I was going to go to, because you look at the Indianapolis Colts, who had a pretty feisty performance against the Titans. Even in a defeat, Mo Alley-Cox, their tight end, finishes with 6 receptions for 85 yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 yards a catch. Those are season ties for him. He didn't get any more than 2 receptions in the previous 3 weeks prior. So sure, you got some guys that are tackling machines, but they are liabilities in coverage. And one thing of the things that, I want to call out Scott Turner for in general, just isn't an ability to get his playmakers out with people one-on-one in space. You have Antonio Gibson, who only, I think, had 3 targets as a pass catcher last week. That's unacceptable. I mean, you have an athletic Dallas defense, but I can't quite say the same for the Tennessee Titans. And I think moving forward, there has to be some hesitancy with giving Antonio Gibson too much volume. Well, you don't have that hesitancy with Brian Robinson Jr. They said that they're going forward as if he's completely medical cleared, no restrictions. Now, we're recording here, obviously, on a Tuesday night, and, it's not quite sure how much of a workload he is going to have. But if he does, if this is a guy who gets possibly 20 carries, I think he's going to possibly get close to breaking 100 yards with that. I really do think that Brian Robinson Jr. is going to be a huge X factor for this offense moving forward. He's extremely physical. Quite frankly, you need to beat the Tennessee Titans at their own game, and that's play action and shoving the ball down their throat. I expect this to be a very old school, old-fashioned smash mouth football game, and I think that it's going to be it really is going to come down to probably the last possession. But with the beating the Titans at their own game, we already talked about Ryan Tannehill possibly, his job doesn't have a whole lot of job security in general. And a lot of people can make the same argument for Carson Wentz right now with the Washington Commanders. Sure. Ron Rivera, dating back to Dwayne Haskins last year with the Washington then football team, said that his performance was quote unquote unfair to the other 52, said that changes are possibly on the horizon. He's mentioned that little win streak they went on, the 4 in a row. He also mentioned that they ran the ball 6 more times a game in all of those games that they did win. He says he knows that teams are putting their ears back and just attacking this quarterback. Says that Carson needs to get rid of the ball and live to fight another down. What are your expectations moving forward at the quarterback position? Obviously, the compensatory pick is a big factor. There's a lot of animosity amongst the fan base, people saying, well, you don't make that move, or you keep Carson in. There's no need to bring in Taylor. Taylor's got nothing to prove. Where do you stand on the quarterback situation, or dare I say controversy?
Yeah. So for me, you've already traded the assets for Carson Wentz. So you may as well squeeze out whatever you can get out of him, whatever production there is to be had, do it, because we're not getting those draft picks back. And if we play him over 70% of the snaps this year, that 3rd round pick turns into a 2nd round pick. So we really need to make sure that we're utilizing Carson the correct way, because the last 2 games is not the way to do it. We saw the production, we saw the sacks, we saw what that looks like. So we've got to find a better way to utilize him. And that's really what this offense needs. So Turner and Ron Rivera need to figure out what they want to do. Do they want to be a 45 plus pass attempt type team? Do they want to be the running team that kind of Rivera seems to want to envision? And they probably need to come somewhere in the middle and get a little bit more balanced. It doesn't need to be all run. It doesn't need to be all pass. But they need to find some balance, because right now we're not very balanced, and the defense knows it, and they're having their way with us. So, for me, let's exhaust what possibility we have with Carson Wentz first before we go to Heineke, before we go to Sam Howell. And believe me, I was a big Sam Howell guy in the draft. He was one of the guys I wanted us to draft right from the jump. And it was kind of cool that we actually got him. So And I think he's got a lot of talent. But hey, we're not there yet. Sam needs time, and we're still early in the season. We can change this. We can turn this thing around if we make some changes. So I think they need to Ron and Scott need to kind of get together and figure out, hey, all right,
he claims that that's happened. He's claimed that he's talked to Carson. He's claimed that he's talked to Scott. And I think depending on when these conversations happen, Brian, this is just a bottom of the barrel, bottom of the league type of offense we're watching right now. I mean, I'm a big Sam Howell guy. I'm wearing a Heineke shirt right now, honestly, just to be ironic. And, a big thing about Carson coming into the season for me was his inability to get rid of the ball. That was a big thing with Dwayne, God rest his soul, when he was here, was that his performance was unfair to the other 52 men. And Ron wasn't wrong about that. And in fact, I respected the Mike Tomlin level quickness of being like, this isn't our guy. This isn't going to work. Let's move on. To me, when you're getting into the compensatory conversation, it's loser talk. Because then is it about draft status or is it about actually wanting to win football games? And in year 3, Ron's put his foot in his mouth a little bit too much. I know I'm throwing my opinions in here, but at the end of the day, this is a roster. This is a team that was expected to compete in 2022. That's why you go out and get a guy like Carson Wentz. I'm definitely in the same boat you are with Sam Howell. I think throwing him out there right now is definitely going to get him hurt or just kind of ruin his psyche early in his career. But at the same time, you have fans preaching, move the pocket, move the pocket, move the pocket. Carson has to have better awareness. Carson has to get that. I know you can't blame it all on him, and I will say that the offensive line has been bad, but at the same time, it's about the other 52, and there's going to be some resentment there with this offensive line if Carson doesn't start doing what he needs to do. JP kind of alluded to that on his show, and Ron kind of brings up, the second half of Detroit, all those garbage time yards, and then Jacksonville, where they clearly gave us the game. I mean, I was there. And, he even said, when Carson has a clean pocket, he leads the NFL in completion percentage. But, I mean, let's look at how many of those passes are actually beyond the line of scrimmage. I mean, really? And then that attribute, you bring Scott Turner in that conversation as well. Scott, Ken Zampese, and all these guys said, once you get Carson Wentz, it opens the playbook up. Yeah. My thing is, Ron says that changes are on the horizon, but my question is, at what point is that change going to come? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Taylor Heineke is the future of this organization, but if Taylor Heineke cannot be a statue in the pocket, Taylor Heineke has some familiarity with this offense, and you look at this time last year, we're top 10 in EPA, we're bottom 3 right now. I mean, look at people can say I'm being negative, people can say I'm being a pessimist, Brian, you guys keep it real just like I do, but this is bottom of the league numbers for this offense, and something has got to give. I'm not excited about it being against a pretty physical Titans defense as well, being the quote-unquote get-right game. And I got to say, kind of in closure on Rivera, I appreciate the transparency. He says we're not giving fans a reason to come back, and he's right. I had season ticket reps hitting me up, and I'm like, why would I want to invest in this as an on-the-field product, guys? And, something that really turns me off, and it really rubbed me the wrong way back in 2019 when he first made comments like this. Jonathan Allen told the fans to keep the same energy.
Yeah, I heard that today. Yeah.
Speaking of the other 52, you hope that the other 52 are half the player that Jonathan Allen is. You talked about how great he's been. He has been absolutely superb. Definitely the best defensive player on Dallas, maybe outside of Cam Curl. Yep. What did you make of Jonathan Allen's comments? I feel like this is becoming like a yearly conversation of keep the same energy. I mean, you talked about Dwayne.
Yeah.
Don't be a fan later. I feel like when you're saying things like this, it's going to get to the point where you get to kind of a boiling point with the fan base.
And there's two things. So I don't know how old you are. I'll tell you, I'm 39. So there is a little bit of perspective that needs to happen kind of from both sides. One, the player side, and one, the fan side. And for the players, right, these are all essentially young men in their 20s. And, I don't know if they have the perspective of being a lifelong fan, right, of going to work all week and then spending your hard-earned money on tickets, on shirts, on jerseys, on all these things. And then you go to the game on Sunday and your team gets blown out by 25. Guys are running free in the secondary. People don't know what their assignments are, and having that kind of feeling of just absolute defeat. So I don't think they kind of appreciate, where the fans are coming from. Like, hey, I put all my time and energy and money into, kind of rooting on this team, and the product that we get just isn't good enough. And also, I think probably from our, perspective, the fans' perspective, we forget these guys, right? Jonathan Allen didn't cause all the stuff that happened 25 years ago or the past 25 years with this team. He's working his butt off, and he's probably pissed. I'm sure he looks at social media. I'm sure he sees some of the comments, listens to some of the radio shows, TV shows, all those kinds of things, and he's like, man, I'm trying. I made a Pro Bowl last year. I'm trying, and you keep hearing all these things, and I'm sure whenever he puts a post out on social media, you got some people who make bad comments on that post or whatever, and he's probably frustrated as well too. I'm sure he doesn't like losing. He's come from winning programs, so there's a little bit of that. Did I like that comment personally? No, I didn't. But I also think he's a young man who's kind of frustrated, who's tired of losing, and his best way that he could express it was probably that. So
you talk about a guy who's used to winning, Jonathan Allen. You talked about the Saban comparisons with him and Rivera at one point, getting people to kind of buy in. You think about Joe Burrow, who was a winner at LSU, said he kind of had to just uninstall all social media. I can only imagine stuff that Jonathan Allen reads, and we've interviewed him on this show, Draft Night. I mean, he was fantastic, cool. Gave us everything we wanted to know, kind of an insight on Terry McLaurin and how negotiations were for him. I don't expect him to be a social media-oriented kind of guy. I don't even expect him to say things that fans necessarily like, but at what point do you even not believe your own BS in a sense? And I'm not saying that he's BSing us. I think he firmly believes that this team can turn around and right the wrongs, but don't be a fan or keep the same energy. I mean, that sentiment to me is just kind of a moot point. He's always been a kind of lead by play kind of guy, and I feel like he should just kind of stick to that. And, like I said, 2019 Monday Night Football against the I think it was the Chicago Bears. He comes out post game and he's jawing off, and I guess you could argue that that's what good leaders do. But you have Rivera saying, I don't see a reason for these people to even want to come to games. Then you have him saying, well, don't it's just two kind of extremes here, and obviously there's a surplus of apathy right now amongst the fan base because of just how bad the season has started. And, I'll tell you another aspect of it is he is a human being, and that's something that you said or kind of alluded to, and that's something that I can certainly rationalize and agree with. And I'm sure that he feels like this defense has played good the last couple of weeks, played good enough to win these games, and they just can't quite put it together on offense. So I understand the frustration. I just don't understand the whole even addressing the fans about what's going on. I think Rivera's sentiment is probably the most accurate, and I feel like that should be the one that everybody kind of falls into. I mean, at the end of the day, we are consumers, and if you let this team dictate your mental health, my goodness, you are going to be in a poor space mentally because there's no stability with this organization. I mean, I will say, Bryan, I feel like they're a much better organization in general than they were before Rivera took over. You can have people say Jay Gruden this, Jay Gruden that, but at the end of the day, I do feel like we are a better organization. As far as the on-the-field product is concerned, I mean, Ron Rivera's looking awfully Jeff Fisher-ish the more and more these seasons go on.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The comments by the players, the comments from Ron, all of that goes back to the head coach. Any head coach, I think you mentioned Mike Tomlin, Bill Belichick. They set the example for their players in everything, whether it's play on the field, whether it's what they say in the press conference, how they act in the community. And I think Ron has been very lax in that. So I don't necessarily blame Jonathan Allen. If you're the head coach of a football team, you tell your players, look, you keep your answers short, you keep them simple, you don't fall for the bait.
It's funny you say that. So
because you don't hear very many Steelers players speaking out of turn, or Patriots players, or you can pick some other head coach. There has to be a plan, and Ron has been kind of lax, right? We heard his defensive coordinator speak out multiple times. We hear some of the players sometimes speak out. So I really think Ron kind of needs to rein everybody in, get everybody on the same page, whether it's on-field play or whether it's just answering questions in the media. Look, we've got to keep this thing buttoned up, and we're trying. That's the message. We're trying. We're going to get better, and we're going to fight like hell on Sunday, and that's it. And just keep it on repeat, just like that.
It's very funny you mentioned the coach kind of dictating what these players are putting out, because I kind of ironically, in preparation for this, I was listening to the Bustin' the Boys episode with Taylor Heineke, and Taylor Lewan asked Taylor, he's like, well, how's Vrabel about the media? Like, what does he tell you guys to say? Is there any type of MO? And, they seem to have a lot of things that they related to in regards to, Rivera and Vrabel's handling of the media. To me, this just shows frustration by Jonathan Allen. I mean, like you talked about the winning culture in Alabama, you're coming to the league and, you have all the pieces in place. And now on both sides of the ball, it's like, what are we doing? What's going on? Where is the disconnect? And when one week the defense is good, the offense is bad. When the offense is bad, the defense is. I mean, it's either one or the other. It almost always feels like something that only happens here, but it's not. And I think there are better days ahead. I really do. I don't see this team doing much in 2022, even if they were to string together some wins. And I don't think a bunch of strung together wins really say anything. Just like I felt like winning against Cooper Rush in Dallas really didn't mean anything about the severity, the contendership of this team. And, obviously you get Brian Robinson Jr. back this week. You're possibly getting Chase Young back. They're saying he's week to week. Obviously Chase Young is going to be a much needed addition to this defensive line. Let's just hope that, the season isn't even more lost by them, because then, believe it or not, you get into the conversation of, is there even a point of rolling him out on the field? I understand that people can sit there and try to negate that, but what are your thoughts on Chase Young? We were given that little kind of update by Ron. I kind of want to get your thoughts on that before we move on to predictions to close out the show.
Well, I'll tell you what, I like that you brought up Brian Robinson, because I think he's going to have a much bigger impact than the impact Chase will have. And I know a lot of people will be all upset about that.
No, you're dead on.
But here's the thing about pass rushers and young pass rushers who have like this injury, a pretty big injury, is they're just working on rehabbing, right? They're working out every day and they're rehabbing. They're not working on developing a second move, a third move, a whole pass rush plan, because their time is just filled up with recovery, with rehab, and working out. So he's not even getting to work on his craft. And I think that is something that, as a young player that you're trying to learn how to pass rush and things like that, that can be a big hindrance or stumbling block for him. So when he comes back, I'm afraid that there's just going to be too much expectation. I think people are going to think, hey, he needs to be Superman. He needs to have 5 sacks every game, 4 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions, and it's just not going to happen. He's going to need time to kind of come back together. Whereas, Brian Robinson, he's been running between the tackles his entire life. That doesn't change. He's going to take the football. He doesn't fumble, and he's going to knock somebody out in the hole, because that's what he does. So I'm looking for that to have a really big impact. I think, it'll probably be next year when we see Chase really fully back to himself and dominating and throwing people around. I just think it's going to ask in too much of him for the type of injury he had to come back mid-season and all of a sudden break records and things like that. It's just too much.
I definitely, no arguments here on the Brian Robinson Jr. being more of an impact player. I feel like he's going to be, I know I've said it almost ad nauseum, the shot in the arm that this offense certainly needs. And, and on top of that, I can understand where someone's listening to this and questioning, saying, well, Parker, why do you feel that way about the compensatory pick, but you're possibly entertaining the idea of resting Chase for the rest of the season? I feel like there's just too much invested in a guy like Chase Young. And if he comes back at a point, say Halloween, like JP speculating, if your season's lost, I mean, you're risking re-injury for what?
Right.
I mean, really, for what? And I mean, there's no draft capital involved in this. It's just the health of the player. And if the player is playing for nothing at that point, then I don't think that's a defeatist mentality. And I will say Chase, Jonathan Allen, everybody still seems to buy into the vision of Ron Rivera. But we asked you guys, the Silence Washington listeners, watchers, have you given up on Ron Rivera? We put the poll out and 67% of you have voted yes, you have given up on Ron Rivera as the leader of this football team. So that's damn near 70% of our listeners and watchers are not quite in on Ron's plan. It doesn't quite surprise me to see that number, but certainly an alarming number. I'm sure it wouldn't have been that prior to the start to the season, but I mean, just what a, quite frankly, piss poor start to the season, and, obviously this is a preview episode for this week 5 matchup. So now we're at the part of the show where we predict what will happen this Sunday at FedEx Field for the Week 5 matchup versus the Tennessee Titans, who are favored, by the way, on the road versus the 1-3 Washington Commanders. Titans sitting 2-2 right at 500. But as always, guys, this part of the show is brought to you by our sponsor, Prize Picks. Make sure you use promo code SSNWFT for a $100 instant deposit bonus match. Download the free app, guys. It's there. There's a lot of people hitting some big stuff right now, big prop bets, parlays, all that stuff. Download the free Prize Picks app today. Of course, all terms and conditions apply, and take advantage of our limited time offer using promo code SSNWFT for a $100 instant deposit bonus match. Bryan, we'll start with you. What is your prediction this Sunday for the Washington Commanders for what we're hoping will be a bounce back game? Do you think that they will turn the ship?
I think they right the ship this Sunday. I think Rivera, I think the players, they got their ego kicked in and they are embarrassed. And I think they are actually going to do something about it this Sunday. I think they spent all week drawing up new game plans, rededicating themselves. And I think they come out and I think they stop Derrick Henry and they embarrass Ryan Tannehill and Mike Vrabel. And it's 26-21 good guys.
26-21 good guys. I like that. You know, and it's easy to sit here and say that, you know, Derrick Henry is going to have a monster performance, maybe outdo what he did last week versus Indianapolis, a team that's very familiar with him. But I think they're going to keep him in check. Maybe he'll break open a big one in the fourth. But I have faith in this rush defense. I don't see a big day for King Henry. In fact, I'm going to predict that Brian Robinson Jr. has more yards than Derrick Henry in this matchup. I have the Commanders losing this one, though, unfortunately. I have the bad guys squeaking this one out. I just think that the Tennessee Titans are just a well-oiled machine. They have an identity. They're also just healthier at the end of the day. And, you know, I think that there's going to be more and more questions. 26-19 loss here. I don't think that the pressure is going to let up on Ron Rivera anytime soon. I see Chicago as that get-right game. I think this Titans team was at the top of the AFC for a reason. I mean, Derrick Henry is legit. He's a two-time rushing leader for a reason. Ryan Tannehill, if he stays upright and we're not putting our hands on the quarterback like we haven't been all year, then, you know, he's just going to have a day where he picks this defense apart. And, you know, sure, we've seen some encouraging things, Bryan. I'm really glad you pointed them out. We've seen them kind of drifting away from the man, drifting away from the zones and the situations where it's not ideal. We've seen things trending up for this defense, but this offense, probably one of the worst offensive units I've seen as a fan. Obviously, you know, you and I, different era, different fans, but man, this is just some low-level offensive play, and this is a Titans defensive unit, especially in the interior, that can make you pay. So I definitely think Tyler Larsen coming back is going to be a big-time addition for this offensive line. You need those guards to get right. You hope Sadiq Charles plays well. Obviously, Cornelius Lucas probably getting the nod now that Sam Cosmi is out. You know, losing Sam Cosmi sucks. If you ask Twitter, he was horrible, but, you know, finished with a pretty solid PFF grade. A guy who I predicted to be a Pro Bowl this year. Definitely a rough start. Things haven't quite lived up to our expectations, Bryan, long story short. But the fan in me wants a win, but the realist in me doesn't quite see it happening here. I think that the Commanders stay below 500, unfortunately, but that is all the time we have here on the preview pod. Ryan's got the good guys. I got the bad guys, unfortunately. Of course, we got the post game coming up this Sunday, guys. Comment your predictions below. Make sure you download the free Prospect app and get started. Obviously, you know, a lot of football left in the season, guys. And, you know, I do think this team can turn things around. You know, and I feel like the Chicago Bears are a great opportunity for that. I hate to look so far ahead, man, but, you know, this is a game that I feel like the more you keep the Titans in it, the worse it would be for the Commanders at home.
Right.
Obviously, think Pink game. It's going to be some good stuff there, the breast cancer awareness. Bryan, obviously, man, it's been awesome having you on. You're about to go on.
Thank you.
Watching Declassified, Commanders Declassified with your guys, Lee and Eric. And I'm very excited to listen to that, see what you guys got to say about this matchup. But for the people that aren't following you, man, which is a damn shame if they aren't, let them know where they can find you.
Parker, I appreciate you having me on. This was a blast. Thank you so much. You can find me on Twitter at MisterWhoo with 2 O's 1. That's at MisterWhoo with 2 O's 1. Obviously, I'm on the Commanders Declassified podcast, anywhere you get podcasts. The website is WFT Declassified.com. We write some stories occasionally. So, you know, come by, check us out. And awesome show, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This was pretty cool talking to you.
Can't wait to have you back on. Like he said, they got a lot of pieces on the Declassified website as well. You know, like I said, man, it's been a blast. Even talking about a bad football team, you know, it's fun when you're talking to some good company. So can't wait to have you back on the show. And, you know, like he said, you check out the Declassified website. You can also check out Sidelines by clicking the link tree in the description. You can find us, guys, everywhere, even TikTok, all social media. You can find us in the audio realm. Link tree in the description, whether you're listening or watching us. Click there, find all things Sidelines. And as always, I'm the head of NFL operations. If you know anyone or yourself wants to join the team and be a contributor, we're always looking, guys. SidelinesWFT@gmail.com, or you can DM me at Parker Hamlett, Twitter, Sidelines_WFT. We're over 2K now. We're trying to keep interaction, everything going, guys. We're always talking, always trying to start a dialogue on all forms of social media. We will see you guys after the Week 5 matchup for our post-game, post-Titans. But until then, this is the SSN signing off. Peace.